Hi, so it's Luke from the pagesprinted.com back with some more book reviews. And today we're going to be talking about this book. It's called Larchfield and it's by the author Polly Clark. So on top of reviewing for the Pages Printed, I for years have been reviewing for a website called The Book Bag. It's thebookbag.co.uk if you want to check them out. They're a website who do reviews for the majority of the main publishing houses, and they also do smaller independent reviews of self-published stuff and stuff from smaller kind of publishing firms. They're great. They're a great company. They're fantastic to work for. They're incredibly supportive and encouraging of kind of people who maybe haven't written professionally before or haven't written in a long time. And they get to know you well and kind of send books to you that suit your style, that kind of thing. So they're amazing to work for, and they sent me this book, Larchfield. So it's by the author Polly Clark, who is a Canadian author, but she lives in Scotland, which is where this book is set. She is a poet, she's published 3 poetry collections, and she has also won various prizes for this book, which is pretty remarkable considering it's not actually due to be published until the 23rd of March 2017, so not for about a fortnight now. It's a book that takes 2 time periods and kind of immerses the reader in both, flips between the two, often from chapter to chapter. It does it remarkably well. A lot of books have done that recently, some far better than others, and I often find when reading them that you're often kind of longing to be back in one particular time period. In Larchfield, I think what Clark has done is make both so utterly interesting that you just want to keep reading. But you're not flicking through to find out, to get to another character. You're just in the moment, involved, and really enjoying it. So what's the plot about? Well, basically it tells the story of a young woman called Dora Fielding. She's a young poet, and she moves to this town on the west coast of Scotland with her husband. She's married, and she's pregnant, and they move into the bottom floor of a big old house. So it's a big old house that has been separated in 2. So there's a bottom floor flat and a top floor flat. While she's quite excited to be there amongst this amazing scenery, she soon gets quite isolated. And they also happen to have neighbours from upstairs who swiftly turn into neighbours from hell, despite their Christian views. So the one thing that Dora kind of finds and helps her through this is the fact that another poet, Wystan Auden, once lived in the town as well. So this part of it is factual. Auden did live in this town when he was in his 20s. And through exploring his life, she begins to discover herself and discover various things in the town that kind of really take her on a fascinating journey that involves kind of having her child and learning to live in a place where she's very isolated and quite lonely. What's intriguing is that the author went through a similar thing. The author moved to this town in Scotland. I'll find the name of the town actually. It's called Helensburgh. The author moved there herself, and again she found herself incredibly isolated, especially when she had a baby. And it was when she read a poem by W.H. Auden, The Orators, or The Orators, I'm not entirely sure. She kind of really found her place in the town and felt a lot more comfortable there as she looked at what Auden had done in that town. So her experiences are very closely mirrored by Dora in the book, but obviously Dora in the book is a slightly more heightened and more extreme version of the author who goes through some kind of incredible things through the course of a book and really gets to know Auden very well indeed. Auden himself is a fascinating character. He's not a poet I knew a huge amount about. The only reason I knew him quite well was because I'm a huge fan of Christopher Isherwood, who wrote a huge amount of good books. Most famous probably being A Single Man, which was made into a film maybe 5 or 6 years ago now, directed by Tom Ford with Colin Firth and Nicholas Hoult, which is well worth a watch, but even more is worth a read because it's a beautiful book. He also wrote a lot of other books of which I have most of them, but he wrote a lot of other books set in kind of Weimar pre-Second World War Berlin, which is a period I find immensely fascinating. Some of his experiences were made into the play I Am Camera, which became the film Cabaret with Sally Bowles, and became the film with Liza Minnelli. So he is an author who I would hugely recommend checking out, really. I mean, he's a man who wrote about being gay at a time when it wasn't necessarily acceptable. And whilst his early books aren't necessarily that open about being gay, his later ones certainly are. And he lived with his partner in America until the late 80s. So, fascinating life. And one of his best friends from childhood, really, was the poet Auden. So I knew Auden as a character who popped up in Isherwood's writings and in Isherwood's life, but didn't know a huge amount about the man himself. So this was a fascinating exploration for me, really, of Auden's life and how he dealt with kind of teaching at a boarding school, being in this very small, quite isolating community, and also dealing with the fact that he was gay in kind of the 1930s, so at a time when it was not kind of socially or politically or legally acceptable. So his isolation is kind of a fascinating contrast to that which Dora is going through. The nice thing about it is that whilst Dora and Auden go through a huge amount, their struggles are equally important and given equal importance in the mind of the reader. And it means that these two characters, despite being separated by a good kind of 70 years, have a bond that the reader kind of grasps through the pages and can see developing as you go on. So that's beautiful and wonderfully done. It's a stunning book. It's absolutely gorgeous, and I would really recommend it. I'm not the most emotional of people, but this book certainly made me tear up a fair few times. Sorry, that was my cat coming in. He's just wandering around. So it's a book I would recommend. In terms of stars, I would actually give it 5 out of 5 because it's just that good. It's a fantastic read. It's made me check out the poetry of Auden, for which I'm very grateful because he's a wonderful writer, and I would recommend you do the same. He wrote some very good short poems, some of which are quite well known, but he also wrote kind of these longer, almost story-like poems, which are beautiful and intense and quite intoxicating, so definitely worth a read. Larchfield itself is, as I've said, out on the 23rd of March 2017, and it's published by Quercus. It's a wonderful book. I definitely recommend it, so get your mitts on a copy. Thank you for watching. Like and comment and subscribe. I think that's what I'm supposed to say. And come check out some written reviews on thePagesPrinted.com and also on the bookbag.co.uk. Thanks for watching. I will try and be back next week with some more. Bye bye.